So I'm here to talk to you today about some exciting work we're doing in patient monitoring in hospital. So this is a patient on intensive care. He's got a piece of plastic about the diameter of a garden hose rammed through his vocal cords into his lungs, connecting him to a ventilator. He's got about 16 centimeter tube going in through his neck down to the entrance of his heart to deliver the drugs he needs to keep his cardiovascular system functioning. And he's got innumerable other invasive lines, drips, drains, delivering all the therapies required to support his organs and keep him alive. Being on intensive care, he's got about a 25% chance of dying. And if he's one of the lucky ones that makes it through, it'll take him 6 to 12 months to recover. And during that time, he'll have about a 1 in 10 chance of developing post-traumatic stress disorder. This is something you never want to have happen to you. And yet in the UK, if we can, in the UK, we have about 40,000 patients every year who deteriorate to requiring intensive care despite at least 48 hours of care in hospital. That's about one patient every 15 minutes. And the real tragedy is that we've known since the early 1990s that the majority of these are both predictable and preventable by the simple dint of measuring patient vital signs regularly and intervening early. So this is the current state-of-the-art technology deployed across the NHS, the paper chart. Messy, error-prone, illegible, and that's if it's even in the notes at all. A technology ripe for digitization. And indeed, people have tried. And when we went out at the beginning of our project to look into the market, we found lots of systems which sure that you can get the data into a computer, but every time they required you to compromise on your clinical care, to make it harder to deliver the high quality care at the bedside. And that just isn't good enough. There should be no clinical compromise for digital data. And we knew we could do better for our patients, and we knew we could do better for our staff. And so that's what motivated us to build Send. And when we started, we had one advantage perhaps, and that was the liberating humility to know that just because we were clinicians, we didn't have all the answers. So we started by going into the research, the academic literature, to see what people had done before. We went into the industry to see what other people had tried, what lessons they've learned, and then we went into other industries to see what best outside of healthcare to understand best practices in designing digital software. And finally, we went into the hospital, onto the wards. We sat with our staff, we watched them work day in, day out to really deeply understand their workflow and the environment in which they work so that we could understand what we needed to build and the tasks that we needed to support. And based on that insight, we were also able to develop these 4 metrics by which we could evaluate any solution that we might come up with. So the technology needed to be reliable because any time could be a cardiac arrest situation. It's not acceptable for the system to go down. It needed to be fast, at least as fast as pen and paper. And it needed to be enjoyable so that staff are never sitting there thinking, should I take that extra set of vital signs? Bit too much hassle. Don't think I will. And finally, it needed to be intuitive so that any new member of staff walking onto the hospital for the first time could be up and running with Send within 5 minutes, using it competently. And so, armed with our mission statement, our understanding of the problem, and these metrics by which to analyze our solutions, we set to work. And we iterated, and we iterated, and we iterated, and we iterated. And each time we iterated, we took the solution back onto the wards, back into the hands of clinical staff to understand whether it was working in the environment, to get their feedback. But more than that, we also used best practices from safety critical industries such as nuclear, rail, automotive, aerospace, to analyze the system, to expose the latent failures and design them out so that the system could be reliable, ergonomic, efficient. And so this is the solution we came up with in the end. So we had an integrated hardware platform for fast, efficient, ergonomic data entry at the bedside, a simple, clean interface which color codes the patients according to risk, and a web-based platform making the data available on any device across the trust mobile and desktop PC. And then we rolled it out. And it's now across all 4 hospitals of the OUH Trust, and it's replaced paper on all adult wards. And so when we've done this, what benefits have we seen? Well, at the bedside now, we have a system which is far more efficient than pen and paper, on average, 30% faster. And that's in a clinical trial, statistically proven. Because the data is available at the nursing station, the Trust has been able to introduce safety huddles as part of its cardiac arrest reduction strategy. These are where the staff on the ward get together at the beginning of the shift to look at the patients and talk through them at the beginning to understand where the risk is. The target for this strategy was to reduce cardiac arrest rates by 20% over 2 years. On the pilot wards where we've deployed this, it's achieved that target in under 12 months. Remote teams. So the introduction of SEND has absolutely revolutionized how our ICU follow-up teams work. Previously, they used to see patients in order of geographical proximity. Now they can sit down at the beginning of the day, see where the sickest patients are in the hospital and go to them first. And then once they've seen them, they can continually be checking on them throughout the day so that if a patient unexpectedly deteriorates, they can immediately go back without waiting to be called. And finally, in the boardroom, SEND data is generating unparalleled insights into the routine working practices of the Trust and allowing us to drive quality improvement and process change to bring safer care to our patients. But that's not the end of the story. When we built SEND, we didn't just build SEND for the patients of today, we built SEND for the patients of tomorrow. At the last count, we have over 18 million vital signs in the SEND database from about 150,000 hospital admissions. And that database is growing at a rate of about 1.6 million data points every month. This is a fantastic treasure trove for resource. And we're using it to drive forward the state of art in early warning. So these are a few things that we're doing here. So we're using this data now to improve the current generation of early warning scores, to understand why false alert rates occur, to drive those levels down, to make it better again for staff in today's wards. We're taking those vital signs data and we're fusing them with data from other systems now to bring next generation early warning scores based on a more complete physiological model. And we're looking at patient trajectories over time, bringing that temporal aspect in so that we can track patients according to their trajectory, again bringing earlier warning. And finally, we're looking at personalized early warning scores. You've heard about some of the fantastic work that's been done by the EDGE COPD team, recording patient data in the community. So we can take that patient data from when they're well, fuse it now with data from the hospital to generate a personalized early warning score so that in the future, when you come to hospital, you won't be monitored with some generic early warning score. You'll be monitored with an early warning score which is customized to your personal individual physiology, giving you much more accurate earlier warning. But just improving the care of patients in Oxford isn't enough. To make this work really valuable, it's got to scale. It's got to come out through the NHS and indeed internationally. And in order to do this, we've been able to form an amazing partnership with Drayson Technologies, the University of Oxford and the Trust to work together to bring SEND out and make it financially sustainable and scalable across the healthcare ecosystem. And I'm delighted to say that as of last week, we secured a contract with the first external NHS trust to deliver SEND outside the OUH. And so what I've described here is a system which has been born in the research lab, proven in a clinical environment, and now exported to the wider NHS. And I think, in closing, I think it's worth thinking about the unique ecosystem that's been developed here at Oxford that has allowed that to work, where we can have a multidisciplinary team of clinician researchers, human factors scientists, NHS staff, software developers, and biomedical engineers. We've been able to attract funding from the EPSRC, the BRC, and NHS Digital to do this work. We've been able to prove it in a clinical environment, having had a trust supportive of innovation. And then we've been able to make the links through OU Innovations and the HSN with industrial partners to get SEND exported into the wider NHS and hopefully internationally. This is really exciting work. Oxford is a great place to do digital health. I can't wait to see what we can do next. Thank you.